Hello everyone, welcome to Pixability TV. This is now PixTV24. I'm Rob Ciampa and I'm here with Andreas Goldie.
Hi everyone.
And we're both with Pixability. Now, episode 24. We're putting some serious numbers up, Andreas.
Yeah, it's been 2 years now that we've been doing this show. So yeah, a lot of topics that we covered. So you can always watch our previous episodes on our website. Just go to Pixability.com and then to Pixability TV. And everything is archived there.
Yeah, and we're still maintaining our numbers. Maybe it's time for some syndication.
Yes.
And do it that way. We have an interesting topic today. It's basically we're talking about online video mastery for agencies and marketing firms. And we're dealing what we've seen over the past, especially over the past year. We were dealing with a lot of brands, but recently a lot of agencies have come to us, a lot of marketing firms as they integrate video and aspects of video into their mix. And we're going to talk about all that today. But let's jump right into the agenda. So I think importantly, a couple of things we're going to talk about are going to be actionable right away. So let's walk through what we're looking at. The agency challenge. This is really dealing with what do agencies face and what do marketing firms face. The online video marketplace. You have several choices. We'll be talking a lot about YouTube today. We will also reference other platforms like Vimeo, Blip. There may also be some questions about how I use hosting platforms. We'll talk about the shift to YouTube and what we're calling YouTube Nation. And we'll compare online video versus traditional media. And some of the problems that we see, you can't approach online video with a traditional broadcast media mentality. We'll look at media buying considerations. A lot of that's changed. And again, if some of you folks came in with television experience and you're watching, pay strict attention. There's different ways to really get this together. Avoid view generation scams. Like any internet thing, you can buy lots of views, you can buy lots of followers. We're advocating doing things. We're white hat today, Andreas, so that's going to be important. The power of PR, public relations integration, and how to extend that message, and metrics and analytics, not just for the sake of showing data, but really making that data actionable. You're getting a different type of data when it comes to the online world. Okay, from an administrative viewpoint, we do these live. If you're watching this, non-live, you're watching this a month from when we actually broadcast it, we actually pay attention to the Twitter streams and the webinar streams. So whether you're watching live or in the future, you can reach us at webinar@pixability.com. So send your questions in there, or we also pay close attention to Twitter because we all know that video and social media go together so well. Our Twitter handle is @Pixability. You'll also see our Andreas's Twitter handle and mine later on. And the hashtag is PixTV24. All right, a little bit about us. I think some of you have probably seen Pixability webinars before, but if you haven't, we're a video marketing company, and we specialize in really getting brands, agencies to perform online. I'll have more about that in the following slide. We came out of MIT several years ago. And what we do is we have a lot of very interesting algorithms to allow us to get the performance that we see, especially with content management and more importantly with advertising. And we'll go into some of those details. And a lot of this information is actually available online. We have extensive YouTube experience. Just a lot. We've been at YouTube for many, many years now. And I think it's importantly, we've looked at about 9,000 brand YouTube channels. We've analyzed those. And Andreas, how many videos have we looked at on YouTube over the past year or so?
Well, several million. I actually don't know what the exact number is, but in the dozens of millions. And if we look at the top brands alone, it is almost 200,000 videos now. So there's a lot of activity, and we have collected a lot of data over the years about what makes video successful.
Yeah, now this is really important. From our entire presentation today, we're basing a lot of our performance and what you need to do on our own experience and on our own data. So it's not as if we're speculating. For those of you who've seen our webinars before, we actually go with real information. So let's take a look at what we focus on. When you look at Pixability, we're solving YouTube for marketers and agencies and anybody who really wants to leverage online video to help their business, to help their brand awareness, etc. Two distinct elements. In the past, we've talked a lot about our content marketing solutions, our video platforms, a lot of our services elements, and really getting video to perform. We also have, especially over the past year, done a lot in the advertising world, and especially online advertising, and really done the right right way. So really looking at driving targeted traffic. So we'll talk a lot about those today. But again, the emphasis is on elements of YouTube, but we will again reference some of the other platforms. And the reason we talk about YouTube, which you'll discover later on, is its advertising component is especially important for agencies and other brands. And finally, on Pixability, video marketing for dummies. Andreas is a co-author of the book, sitting next to me as well. These books are available online. They're in paperback or in ebook format. It's a great read. If you go to the Pixability website, we actually have a couple sample chapters. So, real book. It's selling very well. The reviews have been fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
So great reading. So after you get excited about this particular webinar, feel free to go onto Amazon or on Barnes & Noble or your local bookseller and pick up a copy. All right, so let's dive right into our subject matter, the agency challenge. Okay, right off the bat, marketers and anybody doing serious work when it comes to content, the #1 source of content now is video. And people are, you can turn around, and we said this in some previous webinars, a lot of folks can turn around and just you do blog posts and things like that and slideshows, but video works, and that's the emphasis of a lot of marketing efforts these days. So agencies, brands, everybody's looking at video because it works. Okay, it's a very, very effective way of communicating. But you have to ask yourself, especially from an agency or a brand perspective, is a well-produced video still great if nobody watches it? And we'll give some examples of that. We see a lot of very expensive, well-produced video that doesn't perform. Is the video part of a one-off? And for those of you who know us, we advocate video as part of a broader marketing strategy, and that becomes very, very important. So treat video as part of a long-term strategy. And we alluded to this a couple minutes ago. You're approaching online video with a broadcast mentality. It's a different medium with different characteristics. By all means, you have to approach it very, very differently. If you're doing your clients a disservice by not getting the video in front of the right audience, we see this a lot. We see a lot of seeding strategies that get views, but don't necessarily drive what's going to be important, for those views. So it's not just about driving views. You can get views as many as you want. It's about really getting the right views. And then finally, if you're using online advertising, are you paying for the right views or just any views? And we'll talk about strategies with respect to that. Let's look at doing it the wrong way. This is actually a live example of a well-known brand. And what we see here is a video that's thrown on YouTube. What's the strategy? If you look down at the bottom, what you'll see, only 19 views. Okay, so if you've spent $25,000, $30,000 on a video, if it's that high end, clearly you want views. Other elements here, missing descriptions. And then when you look off to the side, you'll see very clearly that other videos as part of this portfolio of this major brand also have no views. So something's clearly not working. So we're seeing not just Liberty Mutual in this example, but we're seeing a lot of big brands and even clearly mid-market companies just not necessarily doing it right. So the investment becomes very important. So again, the takeaway here is how can we actually leverage these platforms and do it right? And I think the takeaway as we move on, it's not just about producing a video, it's getting the video to perform. And that's going to be critically important. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at the online video marketplace. You have lots of choices. You can turn around and you can host a video. You can put it on YouTube. You can put it on Facebook, venues like Blip, Vimeo. If you're a real high-end content producer, places like Hulu. I think when you're considering these, you got to look at your audience. Where does your audience reside? And things like commercial intent is going to be very, very critical. Does it work for business as well? You also have to take a look at this capabilities for search, advertising, and importantly, are you getting the metrics that you want? And especially for a larger organization, are you getting the brand impact? So these are considerations when you're looking at platforms. And one of the things that we see, and Andreas, quite a bit, people come to us and say, well, why don't I just put my video everywhere and that'll be good? But we have some contrary data on that.
Right, so first of all, putting your video everywhere is obviously a lot of work. Secondly, not all platforms are really friendly to commercial videos. Some, like Vimeo, for instance, have fairly strict terms that basically only allow you to publish commercial videos, business videos, when you actually pay for a professional account, and then you get less exposure to the community, so there's less of an advantage there. And finally, Google has actually started to punish people who produce content that they publish redundantly on several channels. So if you publish the exact same video with the same description, same title on multiple video platforms, expect to rank actually more lowly on search results, simply because Google doesn't like you to do that. You appear as a spammer and you just get simply punished.
Yeah, and I think it's an important indication. If your marketing strategy is solid and your video should be tied to your marketing strategy, you're looking at where your audience is, and throwing it everywhere just isn't a strategy.
Right. So let's take a quick look at how YouTube stacks up against everybody else in the market. So the first chart here shows you the size of the bubble. That's the number of monthly video views that each of these platforms get. And you see YouTube is a huge bubble here, and everybody else is fairly small in comparison. You have platforms like Yahoo, Facebook, Vivo, which is mostly music videos, even Viacom, which includes things like The Daily Show and Colbert Report, all very small in comparison. And somebody like Vimeo almost disappears because they simply have much, much less of a reach in a broader audience and attract far, far fewer viewers. YouTube currently attracts about 154 million people in the US every month. So that's about almost 60% of the audience that you can reach on TV, very substantial audience that you already can reach. And when we look at the makeup of the structure of this audience, it's mostly young people. So on primetime TV, currently, when you buy an ad in primetime, you reach 76% of people ages 50 plus. And the target market of 18 to 49-year-old, which typically advertisers care most for, is only about 24%. On YouTube, it's the exact opposite. 67% of people are in this attractive demographic. So YouTube is really a great channel to reach a younger audience. So we're not saying that all these other platforms here are not a good way to reach a younger audience online, but just be aware that YouTube is by far the 800-pound gorilla in the market. So that's what you should initially focus on. Clearly.
Yeah, and what was so striking when we actually looked at the data here was that we saw this very, very stark split. And for the brands and the agencies that are watching right now, this is going to be a very, very important part of your advertising strategy, especially since a lot of brands are doing a lot more focus. Is my advertising working? And we're starting to see that shift from broadcast into online. All right, let's look at the next phase, and something is happening, and our data suggests it. So we're talking about YouTube Nation. And it's been fairly, excuse me, it's been fairly dramatic. And we spoke about this on some previous webinars. So YouTube, it's the #1 video platform, okay, without a doubt. Okay, we're seeing it's also number two search engine. I think it's important. There's a lot of video content out there, so it's not surprising, what's happened specifically with YouTube in terms of searchability and the content that's out there. I think also importantly is within Google itself, we're seeing video searches as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the thing to understand about YouTube is because it is owned by Google, Google obviously prefers YouTube videos over everything else. Theoretically, they are very neutral in how they rank search results, but the reality of it is that you have a better chance of showing up prominently in search results if your video is on YouTube. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. And in some of our data, the brands are being rewarded for it. The march of the major brands here, content marketing and specifically video that we talked about is critical. And 99 of the top 100 global brands are already using YouTube. So everybody is there. And then, 4 in 10 shoppers, me included, will go on YouTube and take a look at either product reviews. I want to see the product. I want to see what's there, and very, very important. And even, I think we also see a lot of folks creating content around brands that might not be associated with the brand. For example, how to use a specific, how do I use my new iPhone, or how do I use this? Yep. So there's a lot of complementary content being developed. Okay, this says it all. Occasionally there's the money slide, and we update this monthly. And what we're seeing here is this is the business video on YouTube. Now what we're showing here, it would be powerful if this were an aggregate number as to how many videos are actually on YouTube. but I think importantly here, this is basically the monthly videos published. So the total number of videos are far, far greater. So if there's any skepticism about is YouTube a viable platform for me, this graph should show everything. The result, it's just, and these are just the top brands.
Right, the big guys are all doing it, and you probably can assume that they know what they're doing in most cases.
In most
cases.
In most cases. Okay, so in terms of the analysis, one of the things I want to do is quickly before we do the analysis, the use of YouTube, we just talked about the brands themselves. And this is Coca-Cola's, this is basically Coca-Cola's, web channel, basically their website. And what they've done is they've turned around and they've incorporated YouTube into their sites. So again, from an agency perspective, if you feel that a specific hosted solution is going to be better, that what's going on here isn't necessarily commercial grade, you're wrong. Okay, so obviously, sites like Coke, the auto manufacturers, the top 100 brands are now including YouTube embeds in their actual website. The quality is there, the analytics there, a very, very powerful platform. So if there's any concern about incorporating YouTube into your website, throw that away. It's part of all the major brands. All right, so let's take a look at what some of the top brands are doing. So Andreas, let's walk through our studies recently.
Sure. So we basically looked at the top 100 global brands in the world as of the well-known Interbrand list of the most valuable brands. And what we found out is that the strategies, the video marketing strategies in this sector are very different, even though all these brands obviously have huge marketing budgets. So you have companies like Disney, Google, Sony, Samsung that produce literally tens of thousands of videos in total, attract billions of views in some cases, and are just very, very focused on using this new medium as a major marketing channel. You have others, sometimes in the fast-moving consumer goods sector, like Kleenex, for instance, or a lot of financial services companies like here AXA, that actually are much more reluctant to embrace this new marketing channel. And we clustered this a little bit here around different industries. And if we look at this slide here, we have the technology industry, not surprisingly, as the most progressive one. So they are really very aggressively using video. We have industries like the car companies that are actually also pretty strong and all seem to have a very similar strategy. So there's a lot of this industry dynamic playing out here. You have the car companies that are all doing kind of the same thing. You have the fast-moving consumer goods guys and cosmetics companies and so on that are all kind of doing the same level of effort. And then you have industries like financial services that are much more reluctant to publish online videos for several reasons. But if you run an agency and you have tech clients, be prepared to really play at the very top of the skill set here. So you really need very good skills to satisfy your tech clients, because they are probably going to compare themselves against people like Google, like Cisco and others like Intel, who play on a very, very high level. On the other hand, there are other industries that are a bit more slow to pick this up, so there's definitely a lot of opportunity out there to support clients with video strategies.
And one of the things that we saw, and we've made reference to Intel previously as one example, a lot of these larger brands, they mix up the content. A lot of it's going to be professional grade content that looks quite good, and a lot of it is user generated content or employee generated content that actually makes it onto their YouTube channel. But what we also see is they're not taking that one-up strategy. In previous webinars, we talked about the importance of the best marketers do a lot of video, and I think this confirms it.
Yes, absolutely. That's what we see consistently, that the most successful marketers produce a lot of content, a lot of very diverse content in style and in production values and so on. So what typically fails the most is a strategy of just having a few commercials up that you have anyway and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I think one of the takeaways here is, especially for the marketing firms that are out there, if your client has a budget, don't blow the whole budget on one great looking video. Step back a bit, split that budget up against multiple videos, and also set aside some stuff, as we'll talk about in a little bit, on the advertising element.
Exactly. So speaking of failing, when we look at how many views these brands ramp up, and again, to remind you, these are the top brands in the world, so all huge marketing budgets. It turns out that almost 50% of the videos that they produce and publish on YouTube get fewer than 1,000 views. So for the top brand, if you get less than 1,000 views, that means nobody has been watching. So that's a complete failure. Only 0.5% actually get more than 1 million views. These are very rare examples, very often combined with a big ad campaigns, a lot of paid views as well. But it's clearly not that easy to reach a significant audience with your YouTube videos. You really have to work on several different levels, and that's what we are going to discuss next. So a few thoughts about how online video compares to traditional media, especially broadcast media like TV. So traditional ad model, we all know, you produce a few really great, glossy, funny ads, preferably with little children and animals in it, always works. And you buy a lot of ad placements, you try to maximize reach and frequency, and then you hope for the best and hope that the customer buys your product. So that's what most people know, and that's how most people in marketing and in advertising still think to some extent, especially if we're talking about mass market brands. They really want to go as broad as possible. Now, this is something that in online, as most of you certainly know, doesn't necessarily work as well. In online, you can target much better, and you have to target much better because people are much more skeptical about where they spend their time and where they give their attention. So the important thing to understand about online video really is that it is a combination of several factors that you have to optimize at the same time. You have to run ad campaigns, and you can run ad campaigns on platforms like YouTube that are very highly targeted, that really reach a lot of people in your core audience way beyond just general demographics. So you can really talk to people who are specifically interested in certain topics and really are actively looking for information about these topics, much better focused than traditional media. This plays into the success of your YouTube channel and also your website, so you can direct traffic from these ads to either your website or your YouTube channel. And the attractive thing about your YouTube channel is it's really a bit like having your own cable station. You have a place where you can publish your content, all types of content as we discussed earlier. Now, it doesn't matter what the production values really are. And by doing this, establish a place where people can find information about your brand, respectively your client's brands, and come back when they're really interested in something specific. This works extremely well. For instance, when you look at some of the best performing car brands, they have a very broad mix of very glossy product videos, but also very down-to-earth, detailed service instructional videos, exactly, where they explain you how you maintain your motor and so on.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, Andreas and I spoke on a previous webinar, the impact, we have social up on this slide, but we've been, I think we've been a little cynical about social.
Yeah, could say that probably.
And I think a lot of social hasn't necessarily been optimal. And again, agencies and marketing firms that are watching this video, you know what we're talking about. You know, the social impact, you know, hasn't been that great. But what we found is that when it comes to social and video, they merge rather nicely. In fact, social becomes a great amplifier for video, and social can also drive specific views. But conversely, is that having video content is a great way to develop that social community.
That's absolutely right, because obviously, if you manage social channels, you know how it is. It's always a question of what do I post next? What kind of content can I use to attract a community? And video is just very simply an extremely attractive form of content. People really love to watch video, especially when it's in a context where they can interact. And therefore, you should always publish as many videos as you can on your social channels. Also, don't worry about republishing them occasionally. We've seen some of the very most successful social marketers, especially in the entertainment industry, just relentlessly republishing all their video content over and over again. People have a short attention span. They don't always read every post in your Facebook page or Twitter stream. So just get the word out there about your video content, and you will see that actually this pays back in your popularity of your YouTube channel, and especially because people will share these videos and you will get more qualified views. So a great virtuous cycle. So we spoke about how YouTube channels are a bit like having your own cable TV station. It's important to know that you can actually customize YouTube channels quite a bit when you also run ad campaigns. So to get a customized channel like this one here, where you have your own custom header and some other elements that you can really adapt to your brand, you have to spend roughly about $10,000 per quarter on YouTube ads, and that's for most bigger clients. That's not a huge chunk of money, of course. If you want a fully customized page like the one that Coke here has, that has a completely different layout, or the one that Pepsi here has, we're equal opportunity Coke channel here, Cola channel. So that actually will cost you a little bit more. So we're talking about in the range of $250,000 to $500,000 in ad spend per quarter. And you also need to work with qualified vendors to actually customize your page. Now, when you look at these customized pages, what we found out actually when we looked at our data is that this is very nice, looks nice, and maybe very different, but it doesn't always correspond with success in YouTube marketing. Very often you see pages like the one here from Pepsi that are maybe, to be honest, a bit over-customized, so they even changed the controls here for the player, which is really from a usability point of view not a great thing to do, frankly. So if you are on YouTube, just leave the player as is. There's some social elements here that are nice, but very often it's maybe not worth investing too much in these customized pages.
Andreas, this is a great point. One of the most frequent questions that we get, we work with so many brands and agencies, is everybody wants that customized channel right away, and they want to get their branding there. Certainly there's an ad spend associated with it, and that's going to be critical. But like everything else, and there is one constant with YouTube, and the one constant with YouTube is change. Okay, so exactly. What the criteria we're describing now may be for it, could change in 6 months. And one of the great things that we found about, and we work with YouTube quite a bit, is they're very forward-looking, and what's coming next, and what can we do for branding. So understand from the agency perspective, what we're going through here, it's important, and they can tune into. You do weekly updates with Pixability, with YouTube Nation on the Pixability site, where we talk about changes to YouTube. So as this changes and we get updates, oftentimes the following week we have a video on YouTube Nation on our site that describes that.
It's really a dynamic medium and changes constantly. So going back to our overview here, we talked a little bit about YouTube channels and how important it is to have a lot of different types of content. And let's not talk about YouTube ads, which is really a great way to drive traffic. So media buying considerations in agency speak. Ad strategies. So the thing to understand is that a combination of good content on your YouTube channel and really targeted YouTube ad strategy is really the best way to get views and web traffic, and views and web traffic from the right kind of audience, that is. So if you have an effective advertising strategy, it will really amplify your reach with the right audience. On the other hand, if you're buying a lot of ad placements to drive traffic to bad content that doesn't really resonate with your audience, then that's just simply bad marketing. You're just simply wasting your money. So the first step is always think carefully about what content your audience really wants, what they will like to watch actively. Remember, they have a pause button on that YouTube player, so it's not like TV, where they just have to sit through the advertising. They can click away at any time. So it really has to be content that works, that you drive ad traffic to.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that what we're proposing here is really about good content.
Yeah.
Okay, so and again, we'll emphasize this again and again, is that if you have bad content and it's not going to resonate, you can buy views.
Yeah.
Okay, and there are plenty of people who will take your money to help you do that. But from an agency perspective and a marketing perspective, focus on the content, and it doesn't have to be. We're not talking necessarily about quality. We're not talking about avatar. We're talking about a great story and a great message within that.
That's right. That's all that counts. Right, so finally, when you buy ads, people have to land somewhere when they click through to your website, so always be aware that, as always in online marketing, you need targeted landing pages that really resonate with your message and are combined with the right kind of advertising goal. Now, how does the whole thing work? It's actually fairly simple overall. So you basically select one or multiple of your YouTube videos as ads, so you can actually use any length of video as an ad. That's a big difference obviously to TV buying, but also to a lot of the other video ad networks where you typically are locked into a 30-second or even 15-second format. On YouTube, an ad can have any length, and we have seen some very successful campaigns actually work extremely well with very long ads, surprisingly, and you will see a lot of these counterintuitive factors when you work with YouTube advertising. The second step is really to place your ads, to buy the right kind of targeting, and YouTube offers you a bunch of different targeting dimensions like geography, demographics, specific topics that you want to appear next to, behavioral aspects, so for instance, people who have watched a video about topic X in the last week, you can show them your ad. And also very specific search keywords when people are really looking for very specific information. Finally, you can have a call to action on your video where people can conveniently click through to your website for more information, and all these results basically taken together make YouTube a very effective ad channel. So there are a bunch of different formats that you can buy on YouTube. There are pre-roll ads, so-called in-stream ads, and the interesting thing about this is that they are skippable. So if you spend a lot of time on YouTube, you certainly know that. You can skip most ads after 5 seconds if you are absolutely not interested, and for the advertiser that's still okay because you got exposed to their brand message. But the interesting thing is the advertiser actually doesn't have to pay for this impression. So they only have to pay if you watch the entire ad or at least 30 seconds of it. And that's of course for you as an advertiser a very, very effective way of reaching people. You get a lot of basically free impressions, even if it's only a few seconds, probably still counts for something. And the people who you really pay for are the ones who really watched your entire ad and obviously are interested in the content that you provided. A second form of ads are keyword search ads. So when people are a bit further down in the marketing funnel, already know what they're looking for, what kind of product, for instance, you can buy ad placements right next to the search results. And finally, there are display ads, the little banners here on the side on the YouTube page that you can buy contextually, meaning that they will show up on videos that are related to what you are selling. So again, very effective to reach the right kind of audience. It's also affordable. We have seen campaigns working starting at a budget of about $30 per day. You can turn it on and off at any time. So it's a very flexible way of doing this, and much more flexible than most other forms of advertising that you're probably familiar with. So just a quick screenshot here for these ad formats. So pre-roll ads obviously run as kind of an interruption commercial in the main video ad. Again, they can be skipped here with this skip ad button. And there's also a companion banner on the side where people can always click through to your website even when the main show is already running. So that's also something to increase click-through rates. And search banners also appear very much like Google search advertising on top of search results. Now, we spoke about targeting, and this is really essential, and it's really a huge difference between YouTube and most other forms of online video advertising. When you look at click-through rates from ads to your website, we actually see with video ad networks, and this is broad industry data, a click-through rate of about 0.7%. So still much better than most display ads, most banner ads, but not very exciting. On YouTube itself, in general, when you buy a broad targeting set, you are going to see something like 3.5% simply because YouTube ad units, these ad formats are so different. When we do our targeting, we have some patent pending software that does that and really goes highly targeted after the right audience. We see click-through rates of 10 to 30% depending on the industry. And that's obviously a huge deal because you're still paying the same amount of money for the same number of views. But if 3 to almost 10 times as many people click through to your website, that's a huge deal. So our recommendation is really spend time, work with professionals for YouTube ad targeting. That's really a no-brainer in most cases.
That's probably the thing that broadcast mentality people don't get.
Yes,
the hyper-targeting aspect is something that's very, very different in the online world.
Yeah, most people still think in terms of hyper-broad demographic clusters, like male 18 to 49, and there's no reason to buy that on YouTube because you can get much more specific with relatively little work.
Yeah, it's also worth noting, a lot of you folks may have had experience with typical AdWords as well. So AdWords for video, and this video world is very different from the AdWords world. And if you haven't had great experience in the AdWords world, you don't take that bias into the online video ad world.
It is very different, and we actually have seen on-site conversion rates, meaning when people click through to your website from YouTube ads, that are in the same range as organic search results. And that's pretty amazing because organic search results is typically the source of the best conversion rates. Absolutely. Because people already knew what they were looking for. And you can get the same results from YouTube ads, simply because you have exposed people to an emotional message, a hopefully very compelling video ad, and when they click through to your site, they're already in the mood to convert. So it's really a great way of doing this. Now let's look at a bit of the more, kind of at the more shady part of the market, so to speak. So there are a lot of these view generation scams. Scam is a hard word, but...
we don't filter.
No, we don't filter. So a lot of companies are in the business of so-called viral seeding. So what this is that there are companies promising to make your videos go viral. How do they do this? They will get you in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and some people will start sharing your videos socially, and then everything goes viral and gets millions and millions of views. That's kind of the promise, and if that sounds a little bit, used cars salesman-ish, then that's probably because it is. So how does viral seeding really work? So what these seeding companies do is they often pay viewers to watch your videos on sites like swagbucks.com. So this is a site where people can register and they can watch ads, and then they get points, so-called swag bucks here, that they can then later swap against, for instance, game currency. If they play Farmville or something, they can swap it against farm bucks or whatever they're called. So obviously these are not people who have a genuine interest in your product. They just sit for your commercial. Very often they will have multiple browser windows open at the same time, probably not even really watching. And that's an easy way to get a lot of views, but obviously these viewers are not worth anything. It's kind of pointless. What seeding companies also do is pay bloggers and even some media outlets to feature your video. Sometimes that gets picked up virally. And finally, they buy cheap ad space on all kinds of second-rate websites. We have even seen cases where they bought ads on pirated TV content. And these are all very cheap ads, very low quality views that you're getting, and seeding companies typically will charge you a very rich premium on top of that. That's just something to be aware of.
Exactly. Andreas, we got a couple of questions come in. For the folks who are just joining or maybe have joined late, we hold all the questions to the end, and we try to answer as many live as we can. So if you have some questions, by all means, get them into us. We're queuing them up right now. Send your questions to webinar@pixability.com, or if you're on Twitter, use our Twitter handle @Pixability and hashtag PixTV24. So we're going to have quite a few questions at the end.
So again, viral seeding sounds good. In most cases, it's disappointing. There are a few success stories, but there are really fairly few of them. Then view sellers are even more shady. They actually promise you to get you a million YouTube views for $50 or something like that. And what they really do is they actually pay people in foreign countries like the Philippines, India, and so on to watch your video as often as possible. They still claim that the views are coming from the US, which is typically fake. It's not difficult to pretend you're from the US on the internet. Nobody uses a dog from the Philippines. And some of these guys even use automated programs. So the problem with that is that this traffic is completely useless, obviously, for your marketing goals, and it can even get you banned from YouTube. YouTube has fairly sophisticated algorithms to detect this kind of fake traffic, and if they catch you, you might face something like your channel closing down. So just be aware that this is a risky thing to do. If you're not in the business of spamming people, you probably should avoid these places.
All right, so lots of moving parts in the online video world. Let's give an example of public relations, because a lot of the marketing firms that we deal with, as well as the creative agencies, there's usually an element of public relations. And in the old days, press release would be issued and then whoever picks it up, great. But we're going to share a couple of examples of why video and why YouTube and some of the stuff we're advocating fits so well into a public relations strategy. So what's critically important is we have to get beyond the legacy print mindset. And I'm going to give an example. Andreas and I actually worked on a campaign for a very well-known entertainment artist. And we received the video asset, we analyzed it, and we knew specifically what the target audience was going to be. And what ended up occurring is there was a press release that we received, and although the press release was fine for its purposes, we didn't feel it was going to resonate with the target audience. So we hyper-targeted the video using our software, but what we did is, understanding the audience, we turned around and we changed the description text to really match what the audience was looking for this video. I think the press release got picked up about 800 times. In the metadata, the description from the video got picked up 3,800 times. So when we talk about the role of video in public relations, it's not just a matter of, hey, here's a video with the press release, enjoy it. It's the elements in the metadata that can also resonate, and it's going to really amplify your reach. So from a public relation viewpoint, it becomes fairly important. It's a more engaged client experience. A lot of firms aren't engaging in using video, so they get the press release, and if you want a prominent press person to write about it, yeah, you can have the gobbledygook that's oftentimes in a press release with the usual quotes, or you can have something that goes a little bit deeper. And we know from video, if somebody's watching it and the video is done well and goes back again, there's a great story, they're actually going to pay attention and more likely to write about your product. So it transcends the usual press release that we see. We also talked about audience reach. That's critically important. And really, it's about amplifying the message. So for those of you folks with the press release, the press relations, media relations, analyst relations, start looking at video as a way to really go much deeper. All right, so that's kind of the operational viewpoint. Now, the online video world, let's move forward and let's take a look at what type of metrics we have. And clearly in the broadcast world, hey, I'm going to be doing CPM, and whoever I'm working with is going to say, hey, you reached an audience of 3 million, okay, this particular night. Okay, great, but what did they do? Okay, so this is where the online video world itself is very important from an analytics viewpoint. So raw numbers are important. So you'll look at that, you'll look at views, user demographics. Traffic source is also very important. Where's it coming from? And in previous webinars, we talked about things like embed sites. So if you have a lot of your partners or you have a lot of your retailers, if you're in the channel world coming back and embedding your video, it shows it's an amplifier, but you want to see that your channel strategy is working. You're also looking at user engagement and sharing, and then importantly click tracking. So I think the important part is get into a process of looking at the data. So many marketers, and especially agencies will present marketers with so much data that they turn around, maybe they'll regurgitate part of it, but they'll send it up. And especially in the online video world, this data is all actionable. Some of the stuff that we've seen.
Absolutely, and the key is really not to spend a lot of time on all these vanity metrics like pure number of views and so on, but really dig a little bit deeper and then really focus just on the important stuff that really drives your business.
Exactly. So let's take a look at what type of metrics are out there and what type of analytics are out there by default. On the YouTube site, it's a great starting point. Okay, it's free, it's out there, but it's optimized for content producers. And remember, we talked about effective video is about content, and it's about marketing that content and getting in front of the right audience so they do something. So it's really important to figure out a lot more information. So what we do with our software side is we've actually augmented that. This is an example of caffeine, and what we're doing here, it's much better to get the right information about the business. Where did my traffic come from? Where do I need to focus? Okay, how are people reacting? And ultimately, what are my competitors doing? And automate as much as possible. The one thing we tend to see in the online video world is that events can occur sometimes, I don't want to say spontaneously, but there can be a lot of, if we look at some, where there's some viral pickup perhaps. So if all of a sudden an online audience is reacting, you want to find out right away, because you may want to engage either your agency if you're a brand, or okay, so if you're a brand, you may want to let your agency know something's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really critical to understand that there's a feedback channel, and if it's just kind of, people actually watching your video. It's still real-time feedback that you get about what people like. And you can also get viewer feedback in the sense of what people really think about your content. So sentiment, comments, and all that. And it's really critical to look at this in real time, react to it, and engage with the community, because that's really your chance of getting a deeper relationship with people.
Yeah. So let's talk. And Andreas and I enjoy this one quite a bit. We talked about vanity metrics, and in the marketing world, there's lots of vanity, and there are lots of vanity metrics. But the beauty of the online video world, and notably YouTube, is you're also getting feedback. Sure, you can get lots of comments, but as we see down below here, you're getting immediate feedback on the video. We talked about this in previous webinars. Audiences are far more likely to react to a video than they will to a blog post. And sorry to the bloggers out there, Andreas and I are both bloggers. We love blogs, but the reality is a visual medium like online video, and specifically YouTube, is going to give that audience a chance to react. Pay attention to it. Okay, so you can count your views, but if you get a lot of views and a lot of people hate what they're watching, it may be time to listen. And we gave some examples previously on some. We work with some major brands. They took a fairly important step. They wanted to differentiate with their online strategy, but we found that audience reacting, they hated some of the talent. Okay, and even worse, they could have socialized that talent in social media, totally absent, and it was right inside all the data. And it was ignored by a major brand, which shocked us.
I think that the crucial thing is that you shouldn't ignore these signals. You should always experiment. So this example that we just showed here from Toyota is actually one of the few bad examples around the Toyota brand. Overall, they are a very sophisticated video marketer. They have a terrific YouTube strategy, but they are also courageous enough to experiment occasionally. And this was a failed experiment, quite simply. And it happens, and you know how it is in marketing. The good thing here is that you get immediate feedback from the market, and then you can move on, and you need to react to that. The worst thing is always to ignore these data points and just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's also, and if you're new to the online world, and the brands have seen this, and the agencies have seen it, not everybody's going to like you, no matter how good your content. It could be a competitor. So it's, I don't want to say it's a free-for-all, but look, the opinions are there. So don't get upset if you have a couple of dislikes. Right. The important part is the likes here. All right, so we're going to do, we'll get about one more slide, then we're going to some of your questions. Again, queue up your questions. I've got them on my screen here. So with the questions, what you've got is webinar@Pixability.com. And for those of you joining late, we actually answer questions even when we're not doing this live. We're recording this live and we're broadcasting live. But at the same time, you can also always tweet to @Pixability, #PixTV24. Okay, so let's close up on now what? Making analytics action. So don't stop at the analysis. What are your actions around that? Agencies, marketing firms, take this information, don't hide it from your client. Okay, if stuff's not working as planned, it's important to take the proactive steps. That's the beauty of online video. It may be about producing better content. Okay, advertising and SEO. Something shouldn't be lost here. We're not talking about advertising and analytics around advertising for the sake of it. We're talking about extending the reach of great content so that organic kicks in. Okay, you're going to see that with your analytics. Your social media outreach, make it a two-way dialogue. If you're not combining your social with your video, you're making a huge mistake, and the metrics will show that. And we tell folks, combine them. We oftentimes hear, well, they're different departments, there's an organizational split. It doesn't matter. If you don't reconcile that, that's going to be an issue. And then ultimately, it's about calls to action. What do you want the people to do? Okay, are they coming back to the site? And the interesting part about YouTube, some people will go from YouTube back to your website, but oftentimes they'll watch another video, which really makes the case for having lots of video content. But they may return to your site, but you want to leave enough of an impression that it's going to come back. Okay, so let's, we're going to go now, time to take a look at some of the questions. And Andreas, let me see what we have, what we have queued up. And so the question goes back to something that we addressed earlier, but let's go a little bit deeper. People are asking about this whole strategy about hitting multiple platforms, and what about hosting in particular? What about hosting and YouTube? Is one over the other? What do you do?
So the game has really changed fairly recently when you look at how video SEO really works effectively. It used to be that you actually should use a proprietary hosting service like Brightcove, Wistia, Kaltura, any of these guys, and do some video SEO around that. There were so-called video sitemaps that you needed to provide to Google, and that made you show up fairly prominently in video search. And in addition to that, you were able to publish your videos on multiple channels like Vimeo, like YouTube, like Dailymotion, all these other sites. Now the game has changed in two ways. First of all, most of these other video channels have simply gone away. So people like MetaCafe, Blip TV, many others have simply stopped accepting user-generated content or marketer-generated content. Even Yahoo Video is now a content channel only for professionally produced media content. You can't publish your ads there anymore. Now, the second thing is that Google has changed how they are treating video content. And as we discussed before, they are really preferring YouTube content, and they are preferring embedded YouTube videos on your website. So that's, for some people, unfortunate reality, but that's reality, that if you embed a video on a YouTube video on your website, you are going to see a much more significant SEO lift compared to a proprietary hosting service.
Exactly, exactly. And so John, hopefully I'm looking, that came from John and another one from Mary. Okay, question pertains to, this came from Julie. Do you just recommend embedding a product demo video link in the press release? Okay, so let's step back, because we talked about the importance of public relations, and video. So what's your message? Okay, and it goes back to, again, who's your audience, who's the recipient. If you're a tech firm and most of your audience, if say you're doing networking devices and you want to get something with Network World, you may want to have that demo in there. But it's got to be a very crisp demo. Although we talked earlier, we see broad ranges of content. You don't necessarily need a 2-minute slot, but for something maybe with a press release, you may want a specific shorter video, but get them back to YouTube or your website if they want to get more information. The other takeaway here is that if you're mailing out your press, or I should say more specifically, emailing your press release, you can't put a video inside your email, but actually having a thumbnail that links back to the video, we found increases the open rate and engagement with that email by about a factor of 3. This just came in. Talking about a good video campaign, what are the elements of a good video campaign? What do folks need to do? And specifically, and a couple people have asked, do I really need to go down an advertising path? Mm-hmm. I think there's a perception that folks have to spend a fortune on this. So let's set some costing and pricing expectations.
Right. I mean, just to be clear, we're not talking about millions of dollars here. We're talking about thousands of dollars. So we have seen very successful campaigns that literally spend anywhere between $3,000 to $10,000 on YouTube ads, and that drove a lot of traffic. So it's not like you're not Nike, you're probably not Coke, and you don't have to reach millions and millions and millions of people. You have to reach a very specific audience. And the great thing about online video advertising, especially on YouTube, is that you have this highly targeted advertising vehicle that even for a relatively low budget can reach a lot of people and get them to act, which is obviously the most important aspect behind it. So expect something like, again, in the 5 figures to typically have a pretty broad campaign. Expect something in the middle 4 figures to make a dent in your marketing strategy. But it really doesn't have to be much more expensive than that to start out with. I mean, we have seen a lot of clients who started out small in these ranges and then ramped that up because they saw it being so effective.
Yeah. So this one comes from Lenora. She's asking about, you folks have done a lot with the video world and specifically YouTube. Do you tend to engage with the actual agencies or with the brands or some other mechanism? It's a combination of both. There are instances where the brand is taking a look at their online video or their video strategy and they see holes in it. Mm-hmm. They're not necessarily getting the ROI that they anticipate. So we may be brought in by a brand and end up working with an agency. In several cases, we're actually engaged by an agency who wants to win a brand, and we'll take a look at the online market. So that's how we tend to engage. What's important is when we're looking at the marketplace, we are looking at the marketplace to see what the audience is, and that's going to be very, very important. It's not just about views, it's really about who's the audience for this video, Does the content align? Will the advertising strategy play into that? Will we be able to reach them, and are we going to be able to measure results?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, the relationship between clients and agencies in the online video world is a little bit like in the early days of social, or going further back, the early days of web marketing. There are a lot of clients that are very open to these new technologies and are almost dragging their agencies into this new era. And on the other hand, there are very progressive agencies that really show their clients what they can do with this new medium, how it fits in with their other marketing channels. And as an agency, you obviously want to be the latter and really be proactive about educating your clients about all the options that you have there. You have to recognize that the space, the whole online video space, is still changing very rapidly. It's fairly crowded in terms of all the video ad networks that you can buy ads from, and all the platforms where you can upload and so on. So it's complicated, and a good agency's job should really be to help clients understand where they can deploy their marketing budget most effectively. And that's what we also help a lot of agencies do, to understand this whole sector and then provide basically an entry point for first demonstrable results that then can lead to an extension of the overall engagement.
Exactly. Okay, this one came from Philip. He works for an agency, a New York agency, and he wants to know if, when they're engaging with a client, is it one YouTube channel or is it multiple YouTube channels? What approach should they take?
That's a very frequently asked question, and there are a couple of aspects to that. First of all, if your video marketing really tries to reach entirely different audience clusters, like for instance different language groups, even different countries, then it makes sense to break it up by channel each for each audience cluster. That absolutely is fair. If you are a relatively small brand, then very often there's a danger of getting fragmented. So typically it's better to first concentrate on one channel, do your homework, and then when you see that you get a lot of traction from one of these particular audience classes, you can always split it up in multiple channels. Overall, from an SEO perspective and also from a community engagement perspective, we tend to recommend to stick with one single channel. It really is effective to put all your money and all your content efforts and all your community management efforts behind one really well-managed channel that typically gives you the best results.
Yeah, and from a brand marketing perspective, an agency perspective, I don't want to call them rogue channels,
no.
But we oftentimes run into brands, and the big surprise is we run our software and all various things, and we find out that there are lots of YouTube channels under a brand that they didn't know about. It makes it much more difficult to manage.
I mean, one thing to absolutely avoid, by the way, is to have channels that are just have a short shelf life and just there for one particular campaign. So you even see this with some of the biggest brands in the world. They have a channel just for their Super Bowl ads for one particular year. And then the channel is just dead and clogs up everybody's search results. And that's just pointless, because then you have to manage yet another channel. We have seen cases where people actually didn't remember the password anymore because the responsible person has left the company long ago. So that's just a disaster. Avoid these temporary channels at all costs.
Yeah, exactly. A couple more questions. One has to do with, you covered Vimeo, but we put our stuff on Vimeo. Why aren't you guys pushing that more? Well, a couple things. It goes back to, by the way, we're both fans of Vimeo.
Yeah. It's a great site.
I know we're talking about YouTube a lot, and there, in fact, we were even here within Pixability last night. We were sharing a great video that we found on Vimeo. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, it goes back to acceptable use. Okay, if you're doing business-oriented, video, it's not going to work, on Vimeo. It's against acceptable use. However, if you're doing educational content and that's your forte, that may be great. Okay, so areas like that. So you got to turn around, if you really want to turn around and commercialize this stuff and really increase search. That's why we put the emphasis on YouTube.
And one footnote, Vimeo still has kind of the reputation of providing better video quality than YouTube, and a better player that is cleaner and not as cluttered. That's both not true anymore if you know what you're doing. First of all, YouTube really provides video quality that is on an equal level as Vimeo. Most people will not recognize any difference whatsoever, if there is any. And secondly, you can actually customize the YouTube player quite heavily when you embed it on your website. Yep. So you can hide a lot of these distracting elements, you can prevent ads from showing up and so on, related videos at the end from showing up. So you have almost the equal amount of control on both platforms. So that's really not a reason to go with Vimeo.
Yeah, exactly. And the last question comes from Steve in Colorado. He's asking about, I'm a small firm, how can I even embrace this, this video element? The reality, Steve, is, this isn't a fly-by-night. It's got a lot more substance than elements of some of the marketing fads. I don't want to call social a fad, but I think a lot of the implementation of social has been a fad. This is here to stay. And so if you're going to really move your client's business forward, you got to embrace part of this YouTube strategy or this online video strategy. It's just a much better way to engage the audience. Okay, so several more. We'll try to answer ones remotely as well. By all means, if you're watching this separately, webinar at Pixability.com. We take questions all the time, as well as at Pixability, PixTV24. So we want to thank you for your time. If you're an agency or a marketer or a marketing firm of some sort, hopefully this has helped you out. We tried to give it straight, and please check out some of our other videos. And Andreas, thank you. Another great webinar.
Yep.
Take care, folks.
Thanks.